rest upon this parasitic foundation. It is a colonial mode of production. This is where Karl Marx was wrong when he determined that what we were looking at is what he characterized as a capitalist mode of production that followed feudalism. What followed feudalism was colonialism. Karl Marx himself had to say that what we characterize as wage slavery in Europe required as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. This is what informs our politics. You can't get out of this without understanding the whole story. You come into the damn movie and it's almost over. You think you know something because you saw this happen or that happen. But the whole story, what holds this damn thing together? They know what holds it together. That's why Uhuru is a problem.
Yes or no? Would you accept Russian money as part of your...
You are trying to make this discussion about something that it is not. You want to know what this real problem is about? If you are genuinely interested to know what this situation is about, not living fancy land about whether or not I accepted money from Russians, this is real. Not the way you want to see it, not the way you want to control the narrative. What I'm talking about right now is that they're using Russia as a part of a propaganda tool against the people to turn you away, to win, first of all, win your unity with the U.S. government. The U.S. government has no ability to answer any of your questions. None. It can't solve any of your problems, and they tell you that it's Russia's fault. Russia is not in your community causing you to starve. Russia is not in your community pushing you out. Russia is not the St. Pete Police Department that killed Tyron Lewis in 1996. It was not Russia. It was the U.S. government that did that.
Preach, sister, preach. Where are all the free speech, right-wing populists when it comes to the Uhuru socialist movement being targeted by Jim Crow Joe? This is Black socialists, their dissent being cracked down on by our white supremacist commander-in-chief. Our white supremacist commander-in-chief is arming Nazis in Ukraine. I mean, I have to... This story is unbelievable. I just break this down in the most simple terms possible. You guys want to hear this? You guys want to see how ridiculous this is? We have Jim Crow Joe, a guy who opposed segregation, the guy who's responsible for over 2 million dead Iraqis, funding multiple genocides. He is currently arming Nazis in Ukraine. Doesn't that sound like a white supremacist to you? So we have a white supremacist president that is now cracking down and charging Black socialists for speaking out against the fact that we are funding Nazis. You can't make this shit up. You can't make this shit up. And this is not new. We covered this when the Uhuru Black Socialist Movement was raided in August. Meanwhile, crickets from the free speech right, but most damning of them all is the Black progressive left. My question to you guys is, where has Cori Bush been on this? Where has Jamal Bowman been on this? Where has Ilhan Omar been on this? Where has unbossed Nina Turner been on this? These are people considered Black social democrats, Black democratic socialists, right? Nowhere to be found when our government cracking down on the First Amendment rights of Black socialists who speak in truth to power, who acknowledge their enemy. The greatest use of quote-unquote authoritarian power you can possibly see is being waged by the Democrats. DHS and ICE funding is hitting record levels due to Democrats. Police funding hitting record numbers because of Democrats. Joe Biden took COVID relief funds and gave it to the police. Meanwhile, idiots, morons that call themselves Black progressives like Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman, they're the biggest buying bros you can find. And this guy is waging an assault on our community. So there's a lot to break down. I'm going to get you some receipts on the story. But first, let's bring our guests on. That's our first intro monologue. Eddie, give me a thumbs up whenever you're ready. We have a great guest. He also talked about Marx and socialism, and also been doing a lot of great content exposing the lies of U.S. imperialism. So Eddie Liger, a great citizen journalist. So welcome to RBN Network. Great to have you on, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick. Been wanting to come on forever. So A lot
Yeah.
to talk about today, like you said.
Yeah, I saw the stream that you did with JB. Powerful stream, and this has been a long time making. People asking to have Eddie on the show, and I want to get your general take. I don't know if you've seen this story where O'Malley from the Black Uhuru Socialist Movement was charged and for speaking out against the Ukraine war. And they said that Russia and these black socialists, and I'm gonna show you the receipt here soon, is weaponizing the First Amendment. Actually, I'll pull the receipts up. But have you seen the story? What are your initial thoughts on this insanity?
I mean, it's wild. It's hard to believe it's even real. It was hard to believe it was real when they got raided. And now they're being indicted. Like the legal system is just kind of not even pretending to uphold the First Amendment anymore. While simultaneously, they're prosecuting Assange and this 21-year-old kid who leaked the Pentagon Papers under the Espionage Act, preventing them from bringing forward that public defense trial saying, you know, we leaked these in the public good. So unprecedented crackdowns on freedom of speech there. And I mean, I had just done a video about Paul Robeson, the famous black socialist in the U.S. who had to testify before HUAC. And, you know, they both used anti-communist rhetoric towards him and racist rhetoric towards him to try and shut him up and persecute him for his political views. And it's like history repeating itself now, just in a different form. You know, it's the same thing. We have these black socialists who are speaking out against the empire, and they're being persecuted by the legal system in front of everybody, plain to see.
Nothing new. And that is the point I made when I was on System Update with Glenn Greenwald. I don't know if you guys remember. Do you remember when liberals and conservatives smeared MLK for attending communist training school? You had the establishment that attacked Malcolm X as an agent of Cuba and a Fidel Castro sympathizer because he said base things about Fidel Castro. That was true. So he was painted as an enemy of the state, the same way Martin Luther King was painted as an enemy of the state. W.B. Du Bois was attacked because W.B. Du Bois has praised Stalin multiple times, and he called out, obviously, the racial inequality that's going on in America. He's not quite a Marxist, more of a reformer, but he praised Stalin, and that is what got him smeared as an anti-American agent of the state. So this is a long-term tradition that Jim Crow Joe is keeping strong. So I'm going to show you guys, and you can react to some of these receipts, Eddie, because this is the headline. If you guys have not seen it today, real advocates of free speech and people who are against militarism is covering it. I saw some in the chat that said Jimmy and Max Blumenthal covered it. I was just on Glenn. He was covering it. And oddly enough, and he mentioned it when Glenn mentioned it when I was on the show, because I was calling out right-wingers for not speaking up on this. Glenn's going to be on Tucker Carlson, I think tomorrow, covering this, which is a huge development. Like, you guys hear my analysis over Tucker. You guys know there's absolutely no love lost there. But that's huge. That's huge, and that shows that people are tired of this massive government crackdown, regardless of ideology. And what does it say? That Tucker Carlson and some members of the right, I don't think a lot of them are, but some members of the right is going to highlight this story, but Cori Bush will not. Nina Turner will not. Ilhan Omar will not. What does that say? And that's where I go, because Eddie, if you was to focus on Nina Turner, Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush, they're like, oh, Eddie, you fucking racist. Why are you calling out our black female Congress people? So I do it because these people are obvious frauds and they need to be held accountable. Cori Bush was an activist in Missouri who, even though despite her betrayals, I still maintain to this day that she was legit. Cori Bush was as legit as you get before you get into Congress. This is why I'm done with the strategy. Because, guys, if they can flip Cori Bush, who was in the streets, well known by activists in Missouri, they're flipping everybody. They're flipping 99% of the population. But anyway, I'm going to read this headline. Feel free to interrupt anytime, Eddie. It said members of the Uhuru movement are charged in a Russian plot to interfere in U.S. elections. Do you guys see the end result of Russiagate now?
Oh, it's so ridiculous. from the country that's interfered in more elections than
Yeah.
any country in history, accusing our own citizens, the actual advocates of democracy, of being Russian agents.
Social
This is
Democrats.
really, this is all Russiagate was ever about. It was,
Yeah.
you know, they wanted to do the proxy war in Ukraine in 2016, but Hillary lost, you know, so that kind of threw a wrench in their plans. Not that Trump wasn't hostile towards Ukraine and furthering the proxy war, but you know, the best thing that the Democrats could do for the next 4 years was just fearmonger about Russia. So then as soon as they got another Democrat in office in 2020, Biden, boom, the proxy war is back on. And now they've had 4 years of anti-Russian propaganda, which they can weaponize for articles like this.
And the people who was debunking Russiagate, I didn't have a platform at the time, but I definitely was speaking out in the capacity that I could. I knew this was what it was going to lead to. Liberal present this idea that, oh man, we're going to crack down and we're going to expand state powers. But trust me, bruh. Trust me. We're only going to do it to go after white supremacists. Trust me, bruh. We got to crack down because we don't want Russian disinformation. We don't want Russians to meddle and destroy our democracy. And we also need to expand the powers of the state to protect you. Protect you. Meanwhile, as this was going on, I was like, guys, they don't give a fuck about any of the shit they're talking about. They're obviously going to expand the police. They're obviously going to give government power to crack down on indigenous people, black people, and workers. And that's exactly what happens. After January 6th, I covered this at the time. You had the Capitol Police who got massive budget increase. But it wasn't only a budget increase, guys. This is what is important. The Capitol Police got massive spying powers, and their powers and their access to information was expanded after January 6th. And this is what the squad voted for. So what did they do after that? Right after, literally the week after this, I covered it on my show. The week after they passed the Capitol Police bill, there was a protest led by indigenous people because they were protesting Line 3, corporate drilling on indigenous lands. And guess who was there to violently crack the heads of indigenous people? The Capitol Police, with all their power and resources that the liberal establishment granted them. That is always the end result of these things. So I'm going to read just a few details from this. Oh, shit, let me pull it up here. From this story, because I'm showing this tweet, because this tweet got some good highlights. So you guys see Amali that was speaking there. You had the Hoover movement that is located in St. Petersburg, Florida. They also have a branch in St. Louis. There's one other location. God damn it, I'm blanking on it. They in Florida and they in St. Louis. So that's another reason why this is important to me, because I'm gonna go to St. Louis. I'm gonna meet the people in the Hoover Black Socialist movement here soon. Because these are Black socialists in my backyard. They're in St. Louis, they're in Florida. I'm blanking on the other location, but whatever, not that important. But anyway, they charging these people. And now this is some detail. This is the part I'm gonna read, because this is the part where it's so absurd. You can't. I'm interested in see what you have to say about this, Eddie, because I can't with this shit. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service allegedly weaponized our First Amendment rights. How I can't. How they weaponize our First Amendment rights.
This is the thing they keep saying with the whole misinformation thing. They keep saying, like, we need to basically crack down on freedom of speech and misinformation in order to protect freedom of speech. It doesn't make any sense. Like, they use the First Amendment, or they weaponize First Amendment rights. Like, what does that even mean? The freedom of political expression, they weaponize that, meaning they express themselves freely. They they pointed out what was actually going on, the truth. That's what I interpret weaponization of the First Amendment to be. And it's these are the same people too who will call you a conspiracy theorist when you say there was a coup in Ukraine in 2014, because all these U.S. State Department connected NGOs were funneling money into the U.S.'s preferred political groups, who in a lot of cases happen to be neo-Nazi, ethno-nationalists, supporters of Stepan Bandera or followers of Stepan Bandera. But then, they're perfectly fine with saying the socialist group, may or may not be taking money from Russia, so we're allowed to throw them in jail. It's the hypocrisy is almost unreal at this point. But that's what, this is the kind of hypocrisy and the kind of absurdity that they need in their rhetoric to justify the horrific actions that they're doing and continue to try and pretend like they're the compassionate ones. Like how many things is the Biden administration?
I think Eddie froze.
Our tax dollars and funneling them into white supremacists in Ukraine. It's the most hypocritical shit ever.
Russia's foreign intelligence services allegedly weaponized our First Amendment rights. You know that thing we said we had here? Stop taking advantage of the fact that we are lying about the rights that your citizen has. What did I say on RBN? I tell you guys, this whole Bill of Rights shit is nonsense. Nonsense. Easily disproven. The Bill of Rights. These are temporary allowances, as highlighted by George Carlin. Tell me more about that Second Amendment right. The second the cop sees you with a gun and they shit their pants. Watch how fast that Second Amendment right will go away. Then conservatives be like, oh, well, of course he shot him. Of course the cop executed that guy because he had a gun. He had a gun, so that probable cause. I thought we could have those. You know what I mean? If they want to, they can snatch all these rights away and they can work backward for the conclusion. So this
absolutely. And
go ahead, Eddie. Go ahead.
I was going to say, and with time, I think more and more of the rights are going to go away. Like, there's always been political bribery, but in 2011, you have Citizens United that basically makes it legal. Now you have the Patriot Act, all these different progressions towards more and more crackdowns, less and less freedom of speech. And this has been the problem with these liberal democracies, which is what our countries claim to be, the Western countries claim to be. When you have capitalism as your economic system, like you can promise the people these political rights all you want. You can say you have the right to vote, you have the right to freedom of speech, political expression, blah, 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 pursuit of happiness. But if you allow capitalism to be the economic system at the core of society, the capitalists are going to accumulate wealth, control the government, and take more and more of your rights away. And they're going to use the armed bodies of the state, like the military and the police, to take your rights away even more, suppress you as much as they need to in order to stop you from overthrowing the economic system. So these liberal democracies can't even live up to their own ideals that they set out. Like you said, the bill with time and with the accumulation of capital, which concentrates power at the top.
Yeah. Well said, Eddie. I'm gonna continue this ridiculous statement because we only one line in. It said Russia weaponized our First Amendment rights. Freedoms Russia denies its own citizens. Like, do you guys know the BBC operates in Russia? RT is not allowed to operate in the UK. RT is not allowed to operate in France. Now, this is and I cannot wait to show you guys my conversation I had with Glenn because he allowed me to take some time to explain the nonsense regarding authoritarianism and the propaganda that liberals use to describe authoritarianism. Countries have laws, and countries will implement those laws. Regarding speech, all countries have laws on speech, including this country. Try to say fire in a crowded crowd. Try to threaten someone's life. Say you're going to kill someone. See how protected your speech are. Those same rules apply to Russia. So the only thing we can really do, knowing that countries have laws and speech has to be regulated in some sense, there hasn't been a country in the history of humanity that didn't regulate speech to some degree. And that's a true statement. So all countries regulate speech to a certain degree. All countries implement laws. All countries have some form of law and order. So what can we use as a metric to determine how authoritarian a country is? Even though that concept is mostly a made-up concept. The only thing you can really do is rely on raw numbers, right, Eddie? Like, because all countries have laws, all countries have prisons, right? All countries have do stuff that we disagree with. in certain points. But who's imprisoning the most? Who's cracking down on the most? That's what I focus on. You have the United States that has 1 billion less people than China, but less people in prison than China. But people want to convince me that China is more authoritarian. So I was asking people to define authoritarian and what does that mean? What does it mean for the DPRK to be more authoritarian than the United States? What does that statement mean when you say that Russia is more authoritarian than the United States? What does it mean when you say Russia doesn't have First Amendment rights compared to the United States? Because I would argue they have more. Like when you talk to Fiorella Isabel, she told you she had way more freedom at RT compared to a journalist who works for CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times, right? So I can expand on this ridiculous concept altogether, but this is a typical propaganda. Now, how ridiculous is our country that our propaganda is embedded in our legal system? So it will be one thing if you're just a partisan, you saying this shit. You're a Western chauvinist and you saying this shit. You're just you're some guy engaging in politics and you saying that Russia has no First Amendment rights. We have. No, this is a legal indictment. Like this is coming from our legal system uses political language, uses propaganda on its own people to justify charging them. Tell me more about how China and Russia are uniquely authoritarian. So they also said what they're doing, they're trying to divide Americans and interfere in elections in the United States. And they also said the Justice Department said they will not hesitate to expose and prosecute those who sow discord, because that's apparently illegal now. Sowing discord. Eddie, you radical talking about Marxism on TikTok? You sowing discord, lock them up. What does that mean? Do you guys like? There's a handful of people that see what's going on, like me, Glenn, Eddie, all our friends. That's talking about the insane, real authoritarian crackdown of our state. Meanwhile, everyone else is talking about bullshit. Everyone's talking about January 6th, red, blue, Clarence Thomas, this, Martin Taylor Greene, this person said that, this person said that. Meanwhile, our government is literally doubling down on fascism. We always been fascist, but we are doubling down on fascism in an insane rate, where the Justice Department is now saying that sowing discord is worth the charge. I cannot emphasize how crazy this is, except with the tone of my voice. That's the only thing I do to let you guys know how fucking crazy this is. So I finished the statement. I said a lot. There's a lot to break down. I'm gonna show you guys my clip on Glenn. We break this down for quite a bit. I explain a lot of different concepts because Glenn is a great journalist who attracts people from all different political persuasions. So I know he had a lot of right wingers that follow Glenn. So I was talking to them. Like I was explaining the concept of authoritarian to them. I was explaining to them how you have people like, I'm sure Eddie as well, many people on the left that stood up for right wingers who had their free speech trampled on. But right wingers, I predict they're going to be just as silent on this issue. But we see, because Glenn apparently going to talk to Tucker Carlson about it. We see. But Eddie, any final thoughts, any last thoughts you have on this story in general?
I think it's important what you said about authoritarianism and breaking down that concept, because it is such a popular concept in propaganda, and I think that can be traced back to Hannah Arendt's book, Origins of Totalitarianism, which tried to conflate the Soviet Union with Nazi Germany, the fascists with the country who defeated the fascists, and that book was heavily supported by the CIA. And this has been the concepts of totalitarianism and authoritarianism. They don't really mean anything, like you said, in the abstract, but it allows the U.S. media to say, these countries are authoritarian, these countries aren't. Well, what does that mean? Like you said, if you start comparing the countries quantitatively in terms of prison population and things like that, the U.S. appears more authoritarian than a lot of them, especially if you look at the recent crackdowns on speech. And I think there's also a qualitative comparison to be made there with countries like China. And this goes back to Engel's 3-page book on authority, which is who does the state, or the state is always going to have a monopoly on authority, but who controls the state? Who controls the authority? Is it the people? Is it the masses? Because 89% of Chinese people support their government. Something like 20-30% of Americans think our government functions efficiently.
Yep.
Right? Because our government is a dictatorship of capital. It
Yes.
only works for the capitalist class and their expansion. So that's how authority is used in our country. Elsewhere, China uses authority to combat imperialism, raise people out of poverty. And no, that doesn't mean they're perfect. But there's different ways that a government can work, and ours is working. Ours is a perfect example of a pure dictatorship of the capitalist class.